Hey guys, welcome back to another ban list prediction video. So just a heads up, I am currently at the back end of being sick. I'm currently recovering from it, so I may sound a little congested, and that's because I am. We're coming to the end of 2023, and most likely at the beginning of 2024, we will be seeing a new Forbidden and Limited list. My prediction is probably sometime mid-January or beginning of February. Honestly, I think February is still kind of late, but January for sure. And I kind of want to predict some stuff that's going on the list. Now, the problem here is that the format is kind of fine currently. My only complaint is I feel like there's just a little bit too much going on in the format. Yes, we have like 4 or 5 tier 1 decks, and then like at that point, everything else is basically rogue. Honestly, at this point, everything else is basically tier 2. There's not really like any bad decks going around in the format currently. And because of that, it's hard to prepare for a lot of stuff at like big events. Like I said, the format isn't really that bad, though it's hard to make a Forbidden Limited list for a format that doesn't really have anything super bad going on. But I think we can definitely discuss some cards that might still make it on the list and just kind of fine-tune the edges to this format. So we of course have Forbidden, Limited, Semi-Limited, Unlimited, and delete that row. Yeah. So to start, Eradicator, that card needs to be banned. I don't see any reason this card needs to exist. I mean, granted, it's really only being played in Labyrinth. No other deck is really playing this anymore, like it was when we first were talking about it back in SIAC format. This card is just not fun to play against. When you get hit with it, it's just super unfun. And Labyrinth can basically activate this turn 0, which makes it even more unfun. So I think it's got to go. It's got to be banned. I mean, Limited maybe, but they can search it and still activate it turn 0. So, but it does take it away from the accessibility of other decks unless they're running Thrust, which Thrust really isn't like super amazing this format. You still see it in side decks, but you're not seeing it in main deck. Agdo, ban that motherfucker. One thing you're gonna notice with my opinions on this like tier list or this ban list prediction is I think Master Duel has done recently on their Forbidden Limited list some really good stuff. And I think we need to take some ideas from those lists that they've been doing lately. And Agdo, and then I have Kelbeck on here somewhere as well. Ban both of them. Tier is really good, and I think Tier will be still pretty good without these two. Just the fact that these two alone can mill a quarter of your deck, so it's not fun going against Tier unless you're playing Tier. Then, you're both just kind of popping off. It's just, and I mean, on top of that, these cards just give Tier so much gas if the mills are really good. And so I just, it's not fun going against these plus the shufflers. And I think we can keep the shufflers because the shufflers are not super crazy. They do stuff for Tier, but nothing insane. As nothing as insane as milling 5 to 10 cards off the top of your deck. That's not fun to go against at all. Yes, this will kind of make Tier a little less playable, but I think everyone can agree that if we're going to start hitting certain cards in Tier without actually hitting Tier directly, the millers got to go for sure. They got to get banned. So this next one's kind of like a little, I guess, iffy. But I felt like I needed to address Infernoble in some way, shape, or form. I'm not overly familiar of what the deck does other than this one instance. Neospace and Aquad Dophin, I think, also needs to get banned. The fact that the connector can summon out Aquad Dophin, and then Aquad Dophin can look at your opponent's hand and kind of just rip a hand trap is just incredibly powerful. And then on top of that, both the cards are warrior, so they get you to Isolde, and Isolde gets you to the whole combo. I think banning Aquad Dophin is enough to kind of slap Infernoble on the wrist without directly just killing the deck. It just, it takes out their like turbo Isolde combo. Like, this basically is their one counter or like 1 or 2 counters to Droll and Lockbird, which is something that really hurts Infernoble. And so the fact that not only can they hit Droll and Lockbird, but then they know what the rest of your hand looks like is just incredibly powerful. And so, like I said, I think banning Aqua Dolphin is a slap on the wrist, but doesn't kill the deck entirely. They just have to play a little bit more safer and play around Droll a little bit better. Again, another ban here. I think Baron Defur needs to get banned. This is not like a, oh my god, this card's broken, needs to get banned instance. Because I personally don't have an issue with Baron Defur. I didn't have an issue with him when he came out. He's just a generic level 10 synchro, which we have a handful of those now, with Dissipator being another. But this was also a Vanadium hit, in my opinion. I think Vanadium is doing really well right now. It's definitely like borderline tier 1 at this point. If it wasn't for Droll and Lockbird, I think Vanadium would be a lot better. And also Dimension Shifter, but we'll talk about him in a minute. I think Baron being on an already fully established Vanadium board just gives too much presence. Usually the ideal scenario is like they summon Baron before summon 5, so that way they can protect themselves against Nib, which is a problem in of itself. That's a deck that does not respect Nibiru, so the fact that they're summoning Baron to just say fuck you Nibiru is incredibly powerful. But also, if you don't have Nibiru, then you have to play through a Baron. Plus, I think they have, like, if they have the fully established board, they have, like, another Omni Negate and, like, a couple other stuff. Plus, whatever hand traps they have in their hand. So, yeah, I just think Baron Defur, I think his time has come, especially because he's incredibly, like, accessible now because of the rarity collection. Everyone can get a super rare Baron for, like, $5. Konami's already made their money off rarity collection, so, now would be the time to ban this card. But yeah, like I said, he's very accessible now. Everyone's got a Baron Defur. And the fact that Vanadium this is primarily like an indirect Vanadium hit because Vanadium already establishes very strong boards, and then Baron just adds to it. Usually makes it an unbreakable board unless you have like Kaijus, which no one's really running right now. This is a card and a deck that no one's really talking about right now. And I think this is still very much warranted. I think Branded Fusion needs to be limited. I love Branded. I've mentioned it 1,000 times on the channel. Branded is one of my all-time favorite decks. It holds a very special place in my heart. But I am willing to acknowledge that Branded Fusion is way too powerful of a card, and in the right scenario just reads, you win. And I think the card needs to be limited because also, I mean, on top of that, like, I believe it's limited in Master Duel. I know it's limited in the OCG. This card is just very powerful, and even at 1, this deck, the Branded still sees success in Master Duel and in the OCG. But also on top of that, Branded is seeing success in the new Branded Chimera deck. And so just, I think limiting this still lets Branded play. It still lets it be splashed as an engine in Chimera, but it does limit its capabilities because their best card is at 1. Moving on to Highway of King Caesar, he needs to get banned. This card is just incredibly irritating the moment he hits the board. Unchained players primarily use this to just establish a really powerful board, something they can already do without Caesar. But just the fact that he can negate a special summon and then destroy whatever the card you're using to summon it, but then also just on top of that, he's really easy to make in the deck, and he's not a once per turn. And if an Unchained player is trying to play around Nibiru, which they sometimes do, they summon this but wait long before summon 5, and then Nibiru is basically just a dead card in your hand. Typically the only outs to this card is like Book of Moon, something that is slowly falling out of favor in the format. Imperm, which does work. Forbidden Droplet works. Just stuff like that. But typically this card is just alone by itself a really hard wall to break, especially if you're playing Pearly. This card is just a big fuck you to Pearly. Just the fact that, again, it's not a once per turn. It's really easy to make, and Unchained without Caesar already makes really strong boards. But then Caesar just standing there looking tall is an even like just worse thing to look at. So I think he just needs to get banned. Moving on, another card that was in the Rarity collection, Pot of Prosperity. Everyone is on this card's ass, and I'm also on this card's ass. This card is way too powerful. Master Duel has had this at 1 for the longest time, and I think we need to get on that train. I think banning it is really stupid because this card doesn't do anything like super broken. It just lets you dig. It lets you excavate up to 6 into your deck, but you are, paying some resources to do such. However, unlike cards like Extravagance, you are only adding one of the cards instead of like drawing 2. And also, if this card gets ashed, that you're only copying the deck, and better luck next time if you can get it back into the deck somehow. But I think this card's just incredibly powerful. But I wouldn't say it's ban worthy. If it's at 1, you'll still see people running it. It's going to be a lot harder to see, and I don't think the card's going to be used what it's currently used for now. Pot of Prosperity primarily is used as a consistency card to be put in decks that without it are incredibly inconsistent. Without Pot of Prosperity, certain decks will fall out of favor because they're not going to be able to keep up. Kashtira was already a very consistent deck. Pot of Prosperity made Kashtira really consistent. Rise Heart is gone. Unicorn is at 2. I think Pot of Prosperity at 1 is going to make Kashtira a little bit more inconsistent, but I mean, we're going to talk about Kashtira here real soon as well. But and also, I mean, Kashtira is not a problematic deck anymore. It's tier 2 for sure. It's very strong still, but I'm just using Kashtira as an example for like Pot of Prosperity is being used as a consistency card, which is fine, but I think having it at 3 is not fine. A lot of people aren't even running 3 right now. They're running 2. But I think just putting this card at 1 is a very good hit. Calamity needs to get banned. I don't know what there's to say about this. This card is toxic. People were running it in Manadium, in the earlier builds of Manadium before they got all their support. People were trying to run it in Synchron, but then they later found out Synchron was bad. But now Centurion is out. And Centurion can summon this super fucking easily. Here's the problem, though. If you ban Calamity, Centurion just can't play the game. Centurion builds very underwhelming boards, and that's why they go for the Calamity lock, because that way they can make up for the fact that their board alone is pretty dog shit. Centurion just as a deck is very underwhelming, and that's why I always say that if your deck relies off of summoning Calamity lock as your like end board, then your deck's probably not that great. And that is the fact. Centurion just doesn't do anything special other than turbo out Calamity. So, yeah. Until Centurion gets more support, if we ban Calamity, I don't think we're going to see Centurion very often. But Calamity has to go. It is a card that just promotes very toxic play. There's nothing fun about the game. The moment this card hits the board, the game just turns the off switch on you. It's no fun. All right, so we're going to address Pearly now. So Pearly is a deck that is slowly starting to fall out of favor. It's starting to get power crept. The only thing that Pearly really got going for it right now is that it has a lot of room for non-engine hand traps, and it builds a towers. That being said, though, people have started to learn how to play around Pearly. The moment you see Pearly, you know where it's going for. Pearly does not like a lot of disruption, which is what is going around in the format currently. But also goblins are coming out in Phantom Nightmare next year. And if that deck pops off, then Pearly Noir is in a lot of trouble. That being said, I think Sleepy Memory needs to get limited or even semi-limited. Just the fact that you can use this card to draw 4 or at maximum 6 cards on your opponent's standby phase is insane. That being said, if we're going to limit Sleepy Memory, I think we need to bring Delicious Memory back to 2. I think if we put Sleepy Memory at 1, we're just taking too many resources away from Pearly, too many memories. So ideally, I'd like to see this at semi-limit. It still opens the gate for 4 draws. Realistically, putting it to 1 and then Delicious Memory to 2 is a lot more realistic and makes the deck more interesting, I think. Sleepy to 1 and Delicious to 2 is what the OCG has currently, which I think is a very good balance. I could see us doing the complete opposite for sure. Big Welcome Labyrinth needs to put to 1. I no longer like Labyrinth. I think Labyrinth is a very unfun deck to play against. I used to not have an issue with it, but I think this deck has the potential to be a problem. And it's not really just, again, I don't think it's a fun deck to play against at all. The games drag out, and even when you win, you don't really feel like you won. And that's because of Big Welcome Labyrinth. The card allows you, the card does just so much. It allows you to special summon a Labyrinth monster from deck, bounce one back to your hand, and then in the graveyard, banish it for cost, target a card on your opponent's board, and it gets bounced back to their hand or their deck or whatever. It just does a lot, and it opens the door for a lot of stuff. And I think putting this to 1 makes the Labyrinth players have to think more on how to use it, because this is definitely the best card in their deck. So I think making sure that they can't just turbo out 3 of these at all times definitely makes like Labyrinth easier to play against, but it makes it just more of a challenge to play without actually killing the deck. So again, I just think the card does way too much, and this deck alone gives Labyrinth its grind game to basically out-resource you, because this deck card also, if you have the right situation, allows you to rip a card from your opponent's hand. So next we're going to talk about just floodgates. I forgot to put Gozen and Rivalry in here, but I think all floodgates need to be banned. Floodgates just instigate a very toxic playstyle, which is prevent your opponent from playing the game. I think Yu-Gi-Oh! At its best is when both players are back and forth interacting with each other, and floodgates like Skill Drain, Anti-Spell Fragrance, D-Barrier, Rivalry, Gozen just shuts that off for a lot of decks. So I think these cards need to get banned, or at the very, very least limited. But I think they just instigate too toxic of playstyles. Cards like D-Barrier can be searched off of Thrust. Again, Thrust is not seeing a whole lot of play right now, or it is seeing a lot of play, but not in the main deck. But just, again, the fact that Skill Drain and Anti-Spell shuts the game off for Pearly, Infernoble too, I believe, Makonko possibly. These cards, again, just turn the off switch on, flip the interactivity switch to off for your opponent, and they're just not fun to play against, and they promote just very toxic gameplay. And again, I just think Yu-Gi-Oh! At its best is when players can back and forth face each other, instead of one guy just saying, no, you can't play anymore. I'll see you when you surrender. Bye. So that's just my personal opinion. These all floodgates need to get banned. Or at least these ones in particular. Again, I forgot Gozen and Rivalry for this list, but I think they need to get banned as well. Rivalry and Gozen could probably be limited, and that'd be fine, but Anti-Spell and Skill Drain for sure need to be banned. Gamma could come back. I think Gamma being put to 1 was the dumbest fucking thing ever. I'm pretty sure a lot of people agree too. Like, there was no need for Gamma to get put to 1. The only issue here is Gamma at 1, his CR is still really expensive. He gets put back to 3, that CR is skyrocketing. But Gamma also would be super good in this format because there's just a lot of hand traps running around. So Gamma helps you counter the hand traps that are running around in the format. So I think this card would be really great if we brought it back, but I don't know. I don't think Gamma being put to 1 originally was ever a good idea, but that's just me. As you all notice, there's a lot of cards I think just need to get banned, but there's a lot of cards we won't ever see banned. Geonator Transverser, I think this card needs to get banned. One could argue you just ban the Acid Golem, but the thing is Acid Golem is only being played in Makonko because Geonator Transverser can put it on your opponent's board. I think Makonko's a really good deck, but they're relying off of the same thing that Brandon's been relying off of for a while, which is just the middle finger, summon a card on your opponent's board and say you can't play. Which is funny enough, the next card is, Gimmick Puppet Nightmare. I think any cards that again, back to the floodgates. Any card that just instigates toxic gameplay of saying your opponent can't play the game is just a card that shouldn't be in our game. Anytime you are giving your opponent a monster, 9 times out of 10, it's not a good thing for them. So I just think Geonator Transverser needs to get banned. And if it's banned, then most likely Acid Golem will go back to seeing no play. So yeah, and then Gimmick Puppet Nightmare. Again, Brandon's not really seeing a whole lot of play, a lot of success, but when it does, it's usually riding the coattails of the Gimmick Puppet Nightmare. The card is basically just an auto win. The only like saving grace is stuff like DD Crow and the Bestials, but Bestials aren't seeing a whole lot of play right now because the format is kind of starting to get dominated by fire attribute monsters, and DD Crow is not seeing a lot of play in general. But I think these two cards need to just go. It'd be safer if they were gone. Rescue Ace HQ. I was really torn on what to put on this ban list for Rescue Ace, because Rescue Ace Sinful Spoils is easily one of the best decks in the format. I can't say the best deck, because I still think that our format doesn't have a best deck, but it's one of the best decks. The Sinful Spoils coming out made the deck very, very powerful. But one thing that Rescue Ace does very well is the grind game. If you're able to break their board and, start playing, if they have the field spell, they can just recur all of those resources and do it again. And that's because the field spell is just really good. It lets them recur resources, whether they're banished or in the graveyard, draw cards, and I believe it also has like an effect that your opponent's monsters lose attack or some shit like that. It's overall a really powerful card. And I think that if you ban the field spell, Rescue Ace loses a lot of its potential in the grind game. And because of that, they don't want to go all in on Turbulence set 4 pass, Because the argument could be made here that you just put Turbulence to 1. Realistically, if you ban the field spell, that second Turbulence is not going to do as much because some of the resources are banished. But that's just how I personally feel Rescue Ace is doing. Rescue Ace, again, is just very powerful, but I think the field spell will really make them have to think more on the grind game. Vanadium Meek, put it at 2. This card's really powerful. It's not a once per turn, and when it's destroyed, it summons out another one from deck, so this is like the best one in the deck of the orbs. And because of that, I think we just put it to 2. Doesn't really kill Vanadium. It slows it down a little bit. One less orb resource. Yeah, that's really all there is to that. I believe that's honestly my only well, there's going to be one other semi-limit. The other semi-limit, bring the Harp back. There's no need for Harp to still be on the ban list. Orcus is not going to be that powerful a deck that Harp can't come off of the ban list. Bring the boy back. I know Orcus Horus is going around, so Harp will just make that deck a little more powerful, but it's not going to break the deck. So I think we bring Harp back to 2, and we'll be looking clean. Another thing that Master Duel just recently did is brought the Dragon Rulers back to 1. All 4 of the Daddy Rulers are back. I believe Blaster is at 2 or 3 in Master Duel. I don't remember. But bring in the TCG, bring Redox and Title back. I think Dragon Rulers could still be a very strong deck, but I don't think I think the deck has gotten power crept enough where this deck is not going to be just insane. I'm sure people will find ways to break it, but I don't think these cards need to be banned anymore. Again, put them to 1, test or trial run that shit. If it blows up in our face, put them back on the list. We did it with Fairy Tale Snow. We'll do it again to other shit. So the next one, you all know how I feel about this man, and I have recently found out I'm not the only one that feels that way. Dimension Shifter needs to get banned. He's the number 1 guy out of this whole list that I think needs to get banned. Anytime you hear those 3 words, draw phase shifter, you're going to have a bad time. Even if you're playing a deck that can play around it, that doesn't necessarily mean you want to. Again, it's just, I mentioned this in a whole video, and I'll put the link at the end of the video. I mentioned this in a whole video. Dimension Shifter it's a card you can't interact with unless you have called by or cross out and you're running your own Dimension Shifter. And this card alone shuts the game off for like a handful of decks. Shifter can just kills tier. Shifter doesn't kill Unchained, but it makes Unchained use resources that they most likely can't get back. Shifter makes Pearly have to play a little bit differently. Shifter makes Vanadium have to play differently. Most likely, if they commit too hard, they're not going to be able to get Vicious Astrolaud. Just Shifter, and Shifter also just kills so many rogue decks. But the fact that your opponent can activate this on your draw phase, turn 1, and it lingers for 2 whole turns, the card, and again, you cannot interact with this card aside from like 2 cards, one of which is a 1-of, and the other one needs you to run Shifter yourself. It's not a fair card. It is just not a fair card, and anytime you hear it activated, you're not having a good time. Speaking of counters to Shifter, bring Called By back to 2. I personally think this card can come to 3. This is a card that there are so many hand traps running around in the format right now. An ungodly amount of hand traps and monsters. You got Veiler, Droll, Ash Blossom. You got Nibiru, which obviously can't be hit by Droll or by Called By. You got Shifter. You got sometimes you have Ghost Mourner. Sometimes you have Spooky Dog. You have Ghost Ogre. There's almost all the hand traps right now are being run in some way, shape, or form. Called By to 3 would do a crazy amount of things. Now, I understand 3 might be a bit extreme, might be coping a little hard, so I'll negotiate. I'll be, I'll find a middle ground here. Let's bring it to 2 first. Master Duel has been 2 and 2. Master Duel has been doing 2 for a while now. Because the thing with Called By right now is that no one's running it unless they have like that 1 extra deck spot. Then you just throw it in, and then if you see it, you see it. But you put it to 2, you might see people running it a little bit more. If you put it to 3, you're definitely going to see people running this. But the card also just helps play against other decks. Like, you'll see, if this card was at 3, you'd see people running it against Tier Limit. That banish Merly, and, Merly is gone. Bye. Or, any other tier name. But I mean, you'll see this run against several graveyard decks because I think graveyard decks should not be neutered like Shifter does, but slapped on the wrist and manageable to play against. But not you don't have to fear for your life when you're playing it. I think is very good. It's very healthy gameplay. Again, I think Call by the Grave is really good because it does not kill graveyard decks. It does provide interactive gameplay with graveyard decks, is what I'm trying to say. So, and I think that is a very healthy gameplay style as opposed to Shifters saying, "Fuck you, asshole." So yeah. As for we're going back to Unchained here. Tour Guide of the Underworld. Let's put her to 1. If this card not only is summoned and resolves, which with Imperm, Veiler, and Ash running around is very not as common as you would think. But if this card is summoned and resolved, let me try this again. If this card is summoned and resolves, it is basically full combo for Unchained. I'm not saying ban it. I'm saying limit it so they don't see it as often. I can't tell you the amount of times I have basically had an Unchained player on the ropes, pass turn to them, and they top deck Tour Guide. It is the most infuriating thing ever. So let's put that bitch to 1. As for the last 2 elephants in the room, Kashtira Fener and Kashtira Unicorn. I'm sure everyone and their mother making banlist prediction videos is saying Kashtira Fener needs to be limited or needs to be banned. I think these 2 need to trade spots. There we go. I think Fener needs to be put to 2. Right now, I think a lot of people have the mindset of either you run 3 Fener or you just run no Fener. But I think 2 Fener is still really strong. Because, that opens the door for, if you're going to run the 2 Fener, yes, Fener can search the other Fener. And then you have no more fener in the deck, so you can't do it again unless you somehow get one of the fener back into the deck. But also it opens the door for, if you just open both feners in your opening hand, then, you know, sucks to suck, bro. Because, like, I think the problem right now is let's use Pearly for an example here. Pearly usually runs 3 fener because fener can summon himself and then replace himself to use the second copy as discard fodder. But then, if that fener manages to stay on the board for a whole round, he can search out the third piece and, you know, discard that other one. That just doesn't seem overly fair. So if you summon him and search out the other one, and then you use that second one as discard fodder, that should be it. That should be the line drawn. You got one shot, kid. Use it. So I think fener being put to 2 is really good. It also just kind of makes Vanquish Soul a little bit less consistent, which, I mean, Vanquish Soul is not a big problem deck by any means, but, like, usually they're running like 3 fener or 1 Arise Heart. Now it'd be like 2 fener or 1 Arise Heart. It just gives them 1 extra flex spot, but whatever. Then we have Kashtira Unicorn. I think Unicorn to 2 was never the right play to begin with. I don't even think Unicorn to 2 really did anything for Kashtira. They really didn't give a shit. So I think just put him back to 3. Fener is definitely the best one in the deck, but Unicorn, you know, I think with Arise Heart gone and, you know, Diablosis banned, Unicorn has so much more playability now because people are now running 1 copy of certain stuff. Like, some decks are only running 1 Little Knight, some decks are only running 1 Zeus, and Unicorn punishes that a lot. So I think Unicorn coming back definitely makes Kashtira still very playable. I wanted to ban fener on this list, but I think that would have made Kashtira just very unplayable, and I think Kashtira with Arise Heart banned is actually a really fun and cool deck now. It's not just the, oh my god, this guy's playing Kashtira, whoop-de-fucking-do. It's not one of those decks anymore. It's like, it's actually a cool deck to watch and, like, see how people play it. I've seen 2 or 3 different ways that people play the deck now, and it's just really cool. So I think bringing Unicorn to 3 and put fener to 2, if fener continues to be a problem, then we put fener to 1. But I don't think banning fener right now is a good idea, especially if we have Pank at 1 still. I think banning fener, when fener and Pank are still like 2 very similar cards with big differences, but very similar in concept, I think banning 1 when the other one's like limited is just but yeah, that's it for my ban list predictions. Or more of like my ban list wish list. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. Again, I apologize for the voice. I apologize for all the cuts. I was coughing like crazy in this video. I am getting over illness. But with that, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. I'll see you all next week in next week's video. Hopefully I feel better next week. And with that, see ya.